For a while now, I have been thinking about the suitability of the Lake Sagami area as a darker sky imaging site. So finally, recently, I took a trip there to check it out. In prior videos, I referred to these short excursions as reconnaissance missions. From the Shin-Yokohama area near to where I live, I took the JR Yokohama line out to Hachioji, where I needed to change trains. Lake Sagami is not actually all that far away. From my house it takes less than 90 minutes by train, and the trip costs only about $12 US one way. The reason I am aware of this lake goes back 10 or 15 years when I went there with my children during their grammar school years. There used to be a privately owned amusement park near to the lake called Pleasure Forest. However, I just learned it is now owned by Fuji-Q Highland Resorts, and they seem to have expanded it dramatically, making it more attractive for adventurous young adults as well. Lake Sagami is northwest of Yokohama, relatively close to Hachioji. If you saw my previous video, Lake Tanzawa is located further to the south, more near to Mount Fuji. Sagamiko is really a small little town along Lake Sagami, which was created in 1947 when the river was dammed. It was actually an Olympic site during the 1964 Tokyo Summer Olympic Games for various water sports. I did my imaging at Lake Sagami Park, which is less than a kilometer walk downhill from the station to the water's edge. After walking along the lake to the west to explore for other potential imaging sites, I did not find any location worthwhile and had to retreat back to Lake Sagami Park. In my mind, the park was a last resort because I knew there was going to be artificial lighting here after dark. It's a nice open area with some relics from the nearby dam, which obviously were for hydroelectric power generation in decades past. There is also a little restaurant and entertainment pedestrian street along the lakeside, which I remember being quite crowded in the summer months. The lake is quite beautiful, and perhaps even more so around sunset, being backlit by the colorful sky. Besides the park lighting which turned on at dusk, I also noticed high-voltage power lines that traversed the lake overhead to the west. To set up my Astro camp, I moved an iron park bench that I estimate weighed over 100 pounds closer to a brick wall, which cast a nice shadow blocking much of the artificial lighting behind it. I am sure that my presence in the shadows that evening looked very suspicious to couples and dog walkers that passed me by at a distance. On this evening excursion, I brought with me the Seestar S30. Originally, as I waited for legitimate darkness, I set up my tripod closer to the water and played around looking at multiple targets, including the Heart Nebula. But I spent most of my time on IC443, the Jellyfish Nebula. For this, I strategically moved the tripod into the shadows next to the wall, facing toward the east. I began collecting data when darkness set in from 6:24 p.m. for a little over an hour. During that time, the nebula climbed from 46 degrees to about 60 degrees above the steep terrain to the east. It rose above a horizon of sky glow, which I believe was the city of Hashimoto or Hachioji, only about 10 to 12 kilometers to the east. The Jellyfish Nebula is a supernova remnant with a neutron star core that is at the most 35,000 years old. It is in the constellation of Gemini, about 5,000 light-years distant. It covers about half a degree of sky and is positioned close to the star Propus, a foreground bright red giant star of magnitude 3.3. This photo is the original stacked image file, a screen capture taken from my Samsung SmartPad. Here, the photo on the right is the image I developed from 322 raw data FITS files, each 10 seconds of exposure time, after stacking in Deep Sky Stacker and processed according to all the software icons you see on the right. After a little human touch and processing skill, the image came out pretty darn nice for only 54 minutes of integration time. This was not my first photo of this target, and I decided to compare it to that which I took over 2 years ago in Yokohama. The image is created from data captured in my backyard using the telescope OTA setup you see here. The photo is 240 minutes of integrated imaging time. I reworked the original subframes for making this video with the same technique I used on the Seestar image. But since that would be unfair to compare this data to the Seestar image, I also created a 54-minute substack and developed that image, which you see here on the left. So now let's compare this file to the Seestar image. Here are the two side by side. The image on the left was captured under the Bortle Class 7 to 8 skies in Yokohama, and the image on the right was captured under the Bortle Class 5 skies of Lake Sagami. If we dive deeper and zoom in on the blue boxed areas, we can see a rather dramatic difference. This should surprise no one that knows anything about apertures and sensors. Firstly, the theoretical maximum resolution of the Zerboni SV503 80ED scope on the left with the ASI 533 MC Pro color camera is 1.73 arcseconds per pixel. The Seestar maximum theoretical resolution is about 4 arcseconds per pixel. Its camera uses the Sony IMX662 CMOS sensor. Also remember the scope on the left has an 80mm aperture, whereas the Seestar only has a 30mm aperture. Of course, the sky conditions will play a role as well, since these were taken on different dates and locations, so that is also a variable. But regardless, the original photo still looks quite nice if you do not zoom in too close, don't you think? Earlier I mentioned I took a few photos as I was waiting for the sky darkness to improve. At this time, the Seestar was positioned near to the lake so I could access the northern skies and image the Heart Nebula above the brick wall. At my latitude, the Heart Nebula is circumpolar. It is a very large emission nebula in the constellation Cassiopeia and about 7,500 light-years away. It is nearly 4 times the size of the full moon, covering about 2 arc degrees of sky. Consisting mostly of hydrogen, but with plenty of oxygen and sulfur gas as well, it has a colorful appearance when imaged in monochrome narrowband. But that is not my cup of tea. This Seestar photo is only a 17-minute stacked screen capture image from my Samsung SmartPad. The image on the right, seen here, is what I can develop from that same Seestar stacked FITS file when processed in GIMP. And the image on the left here is restacking all the original FITS files in Deep Sky Stacker and processing them according to the software whose image icons are shown on the left. I reduced the star field intensity using StarNet++ to achieve this result. What you see on this slide is an image I took about 1 year ago of the core of the Heart Nebula. This was taken with the ASI 678 MC color camera, which has a small sensor and small pixel size of only 2 microns. I'm just showing this to illustrate the capabilities of a more conventional imaging rig like this 80ED telescope from Zerboni. But again, for 17 minutes of exposure time, this is a mighty nice image of the Heart Nebula. By the way, when I was reviewing all the data for preparing this video, I noticed something about the Seestar S30 images of the Jellyfish Nebula while inspecting them in ASI Studio software. I frequently use ASI Studio FITSView to quickly observe the raw subframes for clouds, satellite trails, star trails, and other artifacts before stacking. Here's a QuickTime video I made scanning through these images one by one. I never noticed this before, but the Seestar is actually dithering. When did this happen? If it was always a feature, then why have I never heard about it? In case you are unaware, do you see how the image file seems to shift every 3 or 4 or 5 pictures? That is dithering. The shift occurs randomly around the original set sky coordinates. This is an advanced feature that I have only ever seen done with equatorial mounts. And as experienced imagers know, dithering is very effective at reducing walking noise artifacts in the stacking process. I am officially impressed. Now when ZWO finally releases their equatorial mode firmware update, which has recently been pre-announced, the gap with classical astrophotography rigs will be closed considerably. Both EQ mode and dithering would be awesome. And finally, once again, here are both my images from the evening at Lake Sagami. I was there for only about 4 hours exploring and imaging, and I returned home by 10 p.m. with enough information to know 2 things. Lake Sagami is not a good place for future deep sky imaging excursions with my premium equipment. The park lights, sky glow to the east, and high voltage power lines make it considerably less desirable than other locations. And I might want to visit the new Mori Mori Fuji-Q Pleasure Forest amusement park this summer to check it out. It looks quite interesting and fun. Well, that's all I got. For me, it was another enjoyable astrophotography travel experience. I hope you found it entertaining as well. In Yokohama, Japan, I am JPAstroGuy. My name is Paul Cheesegel, and I want to thank you for watching Astrophotography Japan. Please subscribe and come back again for another future episode. In the meantime, for your deep sky imaging, here is wishing you clear skies and time to enjoy it. Ja, mata ne.